Clarife! Before I get really into the video, I'd like to give a huge thank you to my best friend Fifi. This theory wouldn't be possible without them. I want to begin the theory by showing you all a clip from one of Neopaltime's Twitch streams. For those who don't know, Neo is a deaf Royale High and a really nice friend of mine.
What's the lore? What is the lore? What's going on? Let me introduce you to Murmia. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Now, according to our box, right?
And based off this clip, right, Mimiria is a little important, obviously, but first I want to get into what we know about her as a character, or a doll for Royale High. A lot of people mistake her for a mermaid because of her name and the fin she likes to wear, but she's actually not a mermaid, despite what her name might suggest, with it being Mimiria and all. She's actually meant to be a water fairy. We actually see Royale High Valks, the official X account for Royale High, debunk this idea with themselves with the introduction of Mimiria, the water fairy doll. This explains why her doll form has no tail, unlike some of the actual miniature Royale High dolls, within the Royale High doll line. I personally like to call these pixies because the big dolls are called fairies. Anyways, additionally, her badge art, from what I can tell, indicates that her fin ears are actually just a part of her headband. I also believe her in-person doll is built this way. Now, knowing that Neo said this around the mermaid update, it makes you wonder, how is Mimiria the water fairy lore important then? I mean, there are plenty of examples of mermaids that with actual mermaid ears similar to Mimiria's headband, such as the Sophomore Mermaid and the Siren Mermaid ear fins. I've actually had the question on whether or not sirens and mermaids are meant to be the same thing within the Royale universe for a while now. And this item might be the key to finding out. I had the idea, or was considering the possibility, where fins are a trait among siren-specific mermaids, and this would explain why Harmony has no fins like the soft mermaid. Still, I also heard the theory from Sophie Soph on YouTube, another really cool Royale High theorist that I recently became mutuals with, that mermaids of Divinia might be specifically fairies turned mermaid out of survival and necessity when Divinia became an underwater city or flooded. I also think that everyone pretty much assumes that Divinia is the place Harmony rules, because I'm pretty sure mermaids are meant to live there based off a lot of things that I'm gonna get into. Therefore explaining why she doesn't have fins, because she would be a fairy turned mermaid. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense because you need fairy powers to even make a fishling potion in the first place, and that's how you get gifted a mermaid tail by Harmony. So maybe, I don't know, it's food for thought. Stepping away from that whole thing for a moment, how else do we know Mimiria? Where have we seen mentions of her actually within the game other than the doll advertisements? Oh right, the Throne Tower Diary, more specifically the second diary entry. Also, again, I'd like to give a huge thank you to the amazing Fifi for all these photos and videos and overall helping me with the theory while I was busy with school. The note says, you know Mimiria, my cutie water fairy friend? She showed me something insane. There's a secret about the well. Are you listening? There's literally an entire cave hidden beneath it with gorgeous gems. We were kind of exploring and then I couldn't believe... Why are things getting so strange all of a sudden? The leaves are changing and so are the things around me. I need to write down every weird thing that keeps happening so I don't forget. October 1st, the end of second diary entry. And I find this really interesting because we actually know the exact location the diary is talking about. This was also made before the campus where the well even exists came out, within the archery classroom where you go into the well and then you use the water powers and then it lets you in the cave. They probably added this to the diary so people would think to even look at the well, to find the little chests and stuff they hid in the area, you know, to show its importance and stuff. Um, it also only works when you use specifically water magic, and this makes a lot of sense since the diary author is basically saying that Mimiria is the one that shows this to them. Though this brings me back to one of my biggest questions I had while reading the diary, which was who wrote it? The diary author never once says their name, and it seems so weirdly vague, so I felt like it was imperative. And this isn't nearly the first time we see someone fascinated by mysteries within the Royale universe. But we know who wrote all of those. It was the grumpy voice, aka Captain Whiskers. Uh, but he lives in a completely different area that's far from here. And this person is basically confirmed to be a student within the Royale universe. Uh, and he was fascinated with mermaids, not the mysteries of the castle. And from there, I was honestly stumped. I had dropped the theory because I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. But then Fifi did, and so many pieces fell into place. They suggested it was Arvilla, which I thought was crazy because the whole time I was making this theory, I was thinking it was Rainbow, since she's the light fairy doll. In the very least, we're convinced it was one of the big dolls because it mentions Mimiria and it's a student. So the majority chances were that it was one of the other dolls. We just didn't know which one. But I also heard a lot of people saying theories that they thought it was the Fallen Fae. And for a regular player who is completely a nerd like me, this makes sense in theory because the person is a fairy and they're fallen in a sense. They're saying that they're losing their light powers. But it didn't make much sense to me personally because the Raha lore tends to follow a theme and how they do their hints. While it probably is relevant to the Enchantrix side of the Rawhide lore at the very least, it is genuinely a whole nother can of worms, which originally led me to believe that maybe they were in a no-flying zone since the rainbow theory wasn't working out, since I didn't like the Fallen Fae theory, and I what I mean by no flying zone is when you go in the obby whenever you're going in the dungeons and it says, I can feel my powers fading, uh, to prevent people from cheating the lobby or the obby or whatever. Um, but then Fifi pointed out that telepathy is actually a part of dark magic. So if you look at the magic and powers list when choosing the dark element, it shows that as one of the abilities that dark fairies have, which was a huge breakthrough. So to summarize what's been happening in the diary, and this really sounds like a light fairy turning dark to me, which is really unheard of because we as players are multi-element fairies and we don't experience fully losing an ability to have another power, but I think that's what's happening to this fairy. But to really support this theory, we're going to look at the fourth diary entry, which reads, that we've broken down. My grades are slipping and it's getting harder and harder to concentrate on my homework. Part of the reason is because people keep on barging into my dorm room and then leaving my door open. Literally, this last time I was on my final straw and I didn't know what to do. I was staring at my door wide open, so annoyed, and then all of a sudden it slammed shut on its own. It jump scared me so hard, and I keep trying to convince myself it was just the wind or negative pressure or an ice fairy messing with me. I really want to keep writing all of this weird stuff down, but I'm afraid someone will catch me and tell the headmistress. The last time I was in her office and I asked about her sussy painting, she didn't seem too happy. I might get kicked off cheer. I need to find a secluded place to write. And that's the end of the fourth diary entry. I think what happened in this chapter is her using her ability of telekinesis, which is also listed in the dark fairy magic ability powers. And it's happening while she's really upset, so she's feeling a negative energy in the air. And I think it has something to do with her emotions or maybe even like puberty, because every teenager goes through mood swings and she's experiencing a kind of overall fundamental change. That is really interesting to me because when you're choosing an element, you have to do a personality test. And based off your personality is what determines your element. Now, we could also spin the story and say Mimiria was somehow behind the change, But I don't think that's the case. I also think the ice fairy very briefly mentioned here is meant to be Chrome, which helps support the theory that all the characters within the Throne Tower diary entry is meant to be based off the big dolls. Which brings me to the 5th chapter of the Throne Tower diary. Yesterday, I was looking for a place to write, walking around the Throne Tower since it seems like I might get some privacy there. All of a sudden, I stepped on this weird creaky floorboard that sounded hollow. I became very curious if something was under there. None of the other floorboards were this creaky. It just didn't make sense. So, you're not gonna believe it. Last night, I snuck out my dorm room. I hid a hammer in my jacket and headed to the throne tower. I used the hammer to get the floorboard off. But when I looked down, it was so dark I could hardly see anything. I decided to use a little light spell and actually unveiled a secret underground passage. I carefully walked down the steps to find an entire room underneath the castle. I have no idea what its purpose was, but it's the perfect spot to keep my writing concealed. This actually gives us a huge clue. The diary author is describing the secret room we find using dark magic and breaking the floorboards with a hammer. I'm going to take a second to show you all a recording of inside the room. So now that I've given the visuals of the room that she's been speaking of, I want to talk about the huge clue this entry specifically gives us. The diary author is describing hiding a hammer in her jacket in order to break into the secret room, which is interesting because following the theory I talked about earlier in the video of all the characters within the diary being the big dolls, think about it. Which big doll is known for a fashionable jacket? Arvilla, which makes sense considering the dark powers, but this author is a light fairy, right? Well, the 6th diary entry helps make sense of this, which reads, "If the school finds out I am discovering their secrets, I'll get expelled and they will destroy the evidence for sure. I can feel the last of my light powers fading. I'm going to use my remaining strength to conceal the entrance of this room with an illusion spell. And after I graduate, maybe a clever student will find my evidence and finally put the missing puzzle pieces together." This is the final diary entry, and specifically written on October 31st, which I think is the most important date in all of the diary, since evening fall is when dark fairies are the most powerful, and this could totally be the final push for a light fairy to fully corrupt. The diary author officially loses all their powers after performing this big light magic spell, specifically an illusion spell to hide everything they had been discovering. And the reason we have to use dark magic to discover where they had hidden the diary author's journal becomes more apparent, since light magic is weak to dark magic, and also confirms that the journal we find here has the same author as the diary. I'd also like to note that nowhere else in the journal is the text colored other than here, and the text turns from pink to purple, which is associated with choosing the dark element and also Arvella's main color scheme. You could argue this is because Arvilla is meant to be the poster girl for dark fairies, so of course she would have the same colors. But I have more that supports that it is intentional, that I'll get into in a second here. We are probably the clever student that she refers to, and the journal we find in the secret room allows us to see more of the mystery she had been looking into before she, for some reason, became a dark fairy and had to hide everything she discovered before fully turning. A good example of how the journal and the diary match up is her talking about the fireplace walls and then it being visually drawn and numbered in the journal, which is also how we discover how the fireplace code works in the first place. Because of so much of her diary existing exactly in game, I went back and reenacted some of what she did. And she talks about studying near the fireplace after a pep rally in the first diary. So I went to the fireplace and opened my study book, not expecting much, and oh my god, did I gasp. Because this specific hint seemed right in front of my face this entire time. Because this book has been here since the testing of the very first Newark campus, aka the castle entrance. When you open the study, a drawing of mermaids is there. This photo/drawing in the study book is thankfully the same one from the dungeons near the obby during the sequence. So thankfully, it was easy to go back and see what it translates to. And using the decoder for the Royale language, we can tell it translates to Mermaids of Divinia, which I thought was interesting, because the mermaids here are depicted with finials. One of my friends, Nat, or Nat is Weird on X, pointed out that the potion inside the study book looked like one of the classic mermaid potions. So I went back to see what the potion matched up with, and lo and behold, it was the light potion of all potions. There's also more mentions of the headmistress on the next page, who is mentioned in the diary, and we already know she has her own secrets. This led me to believe that we automatically opened the study book to the page that Arvilla was on. So with that in mind, our ex-Light Fairy was studying light mermaid potions and the Mermaids of Divinia, and also reading something related and or about the headmistress. I think what really backs this up though is the journal that Arvilla hides both has writings and drawings about potions, and the room that we find the journal in is literally littered in potions. Looking more closely at the journal in the secret room, it's kind of hard to translate the text because the decal is so old and therefore blurry, since Roblox kind of sucks whenever. Thankfully, I have a really cool friend, Cloudy Bunny, or Bunny underscore 004 on X. I'm sure you guys have seen them if you're on Royale High the community, since they have amazing outfits. And she happens to know IX Choco, who is the dev that drew this. So Cloudy asked for me what the decal is meant to say, and then texted me the translations. And I edited them over the photo, which is this. I also posted them on my X for any theorist that wants to know what the heck it says and for their own theories. And that will be in the description below, the link. Moving on, the potion drawing on the journal, the writing near it says, missing ingredient needs perfecting. And I was like, what in the world could this missing ingredient be? And then I looked at my theory board inside my dorm. Because, you know, sometimes just seeing the visual of everything all connected can help connect the dots. And I'm like, there's a lot of themes of potions going on. There's the potion that Neo showed on stream and then immediately acted like it was on accident, even though it was so on purpose. It was like to build up height. I'll also show the clip here. And then after seeing that, I was convinced there was more to it, even though she was like trying to downplay it. And I was sat there staring at it, like thinking, and then it clicks. And oh my god, does it become painfully obvious. The missing ingredient referred to in Arvilla's journal is moon water. Neo has emphasized countless times how important the moon is to Royale lore. Example clip here. And one of the very first steps when making a mermaid potion in general is grabbing water and then putting it into a bottle after the sun sets, but before midnight, because at that time the water glows and it becomes moon water, and then that makes a fishling, which we take care of and eventually earn a mermaid tail from Harmony. Moving on from potions for a second, Arvella's doll box has a description about her quite literally saying, the mysterious dark fairy enjoys music, moving objects with her mind, fierce eyeliner, and uncovering castle secrets by night. This helps confirm the fact she is the diary author for obvious reasons. And I also think her name is deprived from the Latin aprilis, which means to open or to bloom. But if that's still not enough proof for you, in the magic and powers list for dark fairies, it talks about how one of the after class activities is wandering around at night. Now keep in mind, her journal, when you buy the doll, not only has all the badges for secret areas like road less traveled, forbidden passageways, and break-in, but also inside her actual journal, when it asks her, do you prefer day or night? She responds with, night, to, and I quote, discover castle secrets. And her secret in the journal is I can hear other people's thoughts. Both things that the diary author, who is meant to be a light fairy by the way, describes in secret about having trouble with and suddenly happened to her. Another thing that helps drive home that Arvilla is not a normal fairy is her wings. If you look at her wings and Rainbow's light wings, you can tell the similarities. But if you compare her wings with specifically the Fallen Fae, you see the similarities even more. This makes sense, because I don't think a corrupt light fairy would have normal wings like a dark fairy would. And it makes even more sense when you compare her wings to a normal dark fairy's wings. So in conclusion, I think Arvilla, the dark fairy, wasn't much of a dark fairy at all in the first place. But hey, that's just a royal theory, a cloudy theory. Thanks for watching, and remember,